The first scream came from the crowd, not of fear, but disbelief. And when Lucas King turned toward the grand staircase of the Waldorf Astoria ballroom, his world, the one he had spent years rebuilding, cracked with the soundless violence of a memory he thought had long been buried. She was standing there, bathed in golden light, the kind that belonged only to ghosts. Her face, her eyes, her lips curved in that same familiar half-smile that once had the power to both ruin and redeem him. The breath caught in his throat. He didn't move, didn't speak because he couldn't. Sheila. No, impossible. Sheila King was dead. Buried, mourned, the ashes scattered by his own trembling hand 3 years ago. And yet, the woman on the staircase was the living portrait of her, a mirror made flesh. The guests' whispered phones, lifted flashes flickered. Somewhere, music faltered into silence. Lucas's heart began to pound with a rhythm he hadn't felt since the night he learned what betrayal really meant. Laura, his assistant, leaned in close, voice trembling. "Sir, are you all right?" He swallowed, forcing composure into his tone. "Who is she?" "Her name's Elena Marin, the European investor we spoke about last week. She arrived early. I didn't." But he wasn't listening. The name slid off him like rain off glass. He stepped forward slowly as if moving through water. Every step toward her felt like trespassing on a grave. The woman's gaze met his. For a heartbeat, the room vanished. No lights, no voices. Just that impossible recognition between two souls who were never meant to meet again. "Mr. King," she greeted, her accent soft, lilting, touched with something French. "It's an honor to finally meet you." The voice. It wasn't identical, but close enough to haunt him. Lucas's lips parted. "Do I know you?" Her smile didn't waver. "I don't believe so." A lie clean as a blade. The gala resumed its shallow rhythm laughter, returning champagne glasses clinking, the orchestra forcing itself to play again. But Lucas's focus never left her. Every movement she made, every glance was a ghost's echo of the woman he'd loved and lost. By the time he realized he was staring, she was already walking away, silk dress whispering across the marble, leaving only the faint trace of gardenia in her wake. The same perfume Sheila used to wear. Back home, Manhattan glittered through the glass walls of the penthouse, indifferent to the chaos inside him. Lucas poured himself a drink, though he didn't touch it. The liquid caught the city's reflection trembling in the glass like guilt. He set it down. His hands were shaking. "Impossible," he murmured. "She's gone. She's gone." But the words refused to believe themselves. He turned to the portrait above the fireplace, the last photograph of Sheila smiling in that red silk dress, the one she'd worn the night before she died. The resemblance was too exact. He'd built an empire on logic, on facts, on precision. Yet tonight, reason had abandoned him. What he'd seen wasn't memory. It was flesh and blood. The door opened softly behind him. Lucas Nia's voice. Gentle, familiar grounding. He turned, masking the storm behind a calm smile. "You're still awake." She stepped into the room wearing one of his shirts, her curls loose over her shoulders. "I couldn't sleep. You didn't answer my call." "Just a long evening," he said, pouring another glass this time to have something to do with his hands. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're shaking." "It's nothing." She crossed to him, her hand brushing his wrist. "It doesn't look like nothing." He wanted to tell her everything about the woman, about the shock still burning through his veins, but the words refused to form, because even saying it aloud would make it real. He forced a faint smile. "You know how I am with these events. Too much noise, not enough meaning." Nia studied him, then exhaled softly, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Then, let me bring back some meaning. Her warmth should have steadied him. It didn't, because when he closed his eyes, it wasn't her face he saw. It was the ghost in gold. The next morning, Lucas sat in his office, the skyline washed in gray rain. He'd barely slept his mind, circling the same question over and over. Who was she really? Sir Lara appeared at the doorway, tablet in hand. Elena Marine's meeting is confirmed for 10. He looked up sharply. Here. Yes. She's one of the new board investors, signed in from the Zurich division. Cancel it. Lara blinked. Sir. Cancel it, he repeated, but too late. The elevator chimed. Elena Marine stepped out, composed, immaculate, her confidence the quiet kind that came from power, or a very well-crafted secret. Lucas rose slowly. Ms. Marine. Mr. King. Her eyes met his, unwavering. I hope I'm not interrupting. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. On the contrary, I was curious about me, about how someone new already owns 10% of my company. Her lips curved slightly. Some curiosities are better left unanswered. He leaned forward. You'll find I'm not fond of silence. Their eyes locked, a clash of recognition and denial. For a moment, neither breathed. Then she said softly, I've heard you prefer control to conversation, and yet here you are talking. A faint smile touched her mouth. Maybe I wanted to see what kind of man hides behind all that control. Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him. Be careful, Ms. Morin. You might not like what you find. I already do. The room thickened with tension, the kind that wasn't attraction, but something older, the dangerous intimacy of memory. He forced himself to look away. This conversation is over. As you wish. She rose gracefully, pausing by the door. But for what it's worth, Mr. King. Her gaze softened, voice lowering to a whisper only he could hear. You should stop looking for ghosts. They never stay buried. And then she was gone. Lucas remained frozen long after the elevator closed. That last sentence wasn't a coincidence, it was a message. A knife disguised as a memory. That night, the rain didn't stop. He found himself driving nowhere in particular, just moving. Past the bridge where he'd once stood alone, past the hospital where Nia had given birth, past every place that had made him believe in second chances. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing, her face. He parked by the East River engine, idling hands, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened. Who are you? He whispered into the dark. A soft chime broke the silence. A message from Lara. Lara, sir, about Elena Marine. I thought you'd want to see this. Attached was a link to an old photograph, a wedding announcement from 14 years ago. The bride's name, Sheila Marine. The groom, Andrew Cole. Lucas's breath caught. The room spun though he was sitting still. Andrew, his best friend, his betrayer, and Sheila, his wife. Before she was ever his. His pulse roared in his ears. He opened another attachment, a passport scan. Name, Elena Marin. Date of birth, 2 years after Sheila's. Twins. His glass slipped from his hand, shattering against the floor. The sound barely reached him. Twins. 2 women. 1 life stolen. And suddenly the pieces began to fit, the familiarity in her eyes. The ghostly echo of perfume, the letter Sheila had once left behind. If you find this one day, please don't hate me. I just wanted to live without fear. Maybe she hadn't meant herself. Maybe she'd meant them. When he returned home, the penthouse lights were dim. The twins, his and Nia's, were asleep down the hall. The world was quiet, except for the low hum of the city outside. Nia looked up from the couch as he entered, her eyes warm with welcome. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He hesitated. "Maybe I have." She frowned. "Lucas." He sat beside her, running a hand through his hair. "Do you believe people can come back from the dead?" She laughed softly, not catching the gravity in his tone. "You mean like redemption?" "No," he said quietly. "I mean literally." Her smile faded. "What happened?" He looked at her. The woman who had saved him loved him back to life, and for the first time in years, he didn't know how to protect her. "There's someone," he said finally. "A new investor. She looks exactly like Sheila." Nia went still. "You mean I mean exactly." His voice cracked, down to the way she moves, the sound of her voice. "Everything." Silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. "Maybe it's just resemblance," Nia said carefully. "People look alike all the time." He shook his head. "No, this isn't resemblance. It's her reflection. And what do you want to do?" He stared out the window, the city lights glinting like shards of truth. "Find out why." Nia reached for his hand. "Lucas, whatever this is, don't let it pull you back there. You're not that man anymore." He turned to her, eyes shadowed. "A part of me still is." She held his gaze, voice trembling with something she couldn't name. "Then promise me one thing: if you go looking for her, don't lose what we've built." He didn't answer, because somewhere deep inside, a voice he didn't recognize was already whispering, "What if you never escaped the past at all?" At midnight, when Nia was asleep, Lucas stood by the balcony, wind whipping through his hair, the city sprawling endless and cold below. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old keychain, the one Sheila had given him on their honeymoon. A tiny silver heart, engraved with a single letter E. He'd always thought it stood for eternal. Now he wasn't sure it didn't mean Elena. He closed his fist around it, eyes burning. Somewhere out there, someone had rewritten the story of his life, and he would find out who, even if it meant unearthing every lie he'd buried to stay whole. The storm outside gathered strength again, lightning slicing the horizon open. The reflection in the glass showed a man divided between past and present, a man who had everything, and yet stood on the edge of losing it all again. Behind him, Nia murmured in her sleep, unaware of the war brewing, just a few walls away. Lucas turned toward the window, whispering to no one, "If ghosts want to haunt me, then they'll have to face the man they left behind." The city answered with thunder, and somewhere across the river, a woman named Elena Marin smiled into the dark, her reflection shimmering in a hotel mirror, the same mirror her sister once used to paint on her lipstick. Soon, she whispered, "He'll know everything." The first crack in their perfect world had just been struck, quiet, deliberate, irreversible. If this story stirred something in you, if your heart caught in that moment when past and present collided, stay with it. Because love's greatest tests don't come when we fall apart. They come when the ghosts return, asking if we've really healed. Subscribe, stay close, and let the storm unfold. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the scent of it, heavy, metallic, like the calm that followed a wound. Inside King Global Tower, Lucas stood before the mirror in his private office, adjusting his tie with mechanical precision. He'd done this thousands of times, the routine of power, of control, of pretending everything was in order. But now every movement felt rehearsed, hollow. Because behind the reflection stood another, a ghost wearing a stranger's face. He heard the door open softly. "Mr. King," Lara said, hesitant. "Ms. Marin has arrived for the board meeting." Lucas didn't turn. She's early. Yes, sir. She said she prefers to observe before speaking. Of course she does. His tone was quiet, but each word felt like a shard pressed under the skin. Send her in. Laura hesitated. Are you sure? Send her in? He repeated, and the door closed without another word. Moments later, he felt her presence before he saw her. That subtle shift in the air, the perfume of gardenia and smoke. When he turned, Elena Marine stood by the window, the morning light cutting across her profile. I hope I'm not intruding, she said softly. Lucas studied her. You were invited, weren't you? I was, she replied, turning to face him. But that doesn't always mean I'm welcome. He met her gaze, unflinching. That depends on why you're here. To build something, she said simply. Perhaps to rebuild. Rebuild. He almost laughed. You don't know what was destroyed. Don't I? There it was again, the tone, the inflection that belonged to another lifetime. Lucas felt his control fray. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. You know? He said, voice low. You're remarkably composed for someone whose resemblance to my late wife borders on impossible. Her lips curved slightly. I've been told I have one of those faces. Don't, he warned. Don't pretend this is coincidence. Maybe it isn't, she said softly. But does that make me guilty of something? His silence was sharper than accusation. Elena tilted her head. You built a life on facts, Mr. King. So tell me what fact bothers you more, that I look like her, or that you still can't stop looking? The words landed like a strike. Lucas exhaled, forcing himself to step back. This meeting is over. I didn't realize it had begun. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she paused and said, without looking back, for what it's worth, Sheila spoke about you often. She said you were the only man she ever loved. Lucas froze. What did you say? Elena turned, then her expression unreadable. Goodbye, Mr. King. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving silence, so dense it felt like gravity. By the time the board meeting began an hour later, Lucas had rebuilt his armor-pressed suit, impassive eyes, tone-clipped and absolute. The room was full, investors, executives, advisors, all eager to study the man who could make or break their fortunes. Elena sat near the end of the long glass table, poised, expression serene. She didn't speak once, only watched with the calm of someone who already knew more than she should. When the meeting ended, Laura followed Lucas out into the hallway. Sir, are you all right? Why, you seemed distracted. I'm not. Then why did you approve her proposal without reading it? He stopped walking. What proposal? Laura handed him a folder. It was slipped in with the Zurich expansion documents. She's suggesting an overseas merger, one that redirects 20% of our holdings into a private fund. He flipped through the pages, every line stamped with legal precision. It was flawless, too flawless. The kind of move Sheila would have orchestrated. Did the board notice? He asked. No, sir. You signed it. Lucas closed the folder slowly. Get me everything you can find on Elena Marine. Personal, professional, financial. I don't care how deep you have to dig. Laura nodded. Understood. When she left, he leaned against the cold marble wall, pulse drumming in his ears. Somewhere deep inside, something colder than anger began to stir, a familiarity that wasn't comfort, but recognition. That evening, he returned home later than usual. The penthouse lights were dim, soft music playing from the nursery. Nia sat on the floor, surrounded by toys, and their twins, all laughter and chaos and warmth. She looked up when she saw him smiling. You're home. He managed a faint smile. Eventually. One of the twins toddled toward him, arms outstretched. Lucas scooped her up the small weight, grounding him in a way nothing else could. "She missed you," Nia said, rising. "So did I." Lucas brushed his lips over Nia's hair. "I know." For a moment, everything felt normal again. The world small, contained, safe. But then Nia noticed the tension in his jaw. "Rough day." He hesitated. "Something like that." "Lucas," she said gently, "I know when something's wrong. You can talk to me." He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But how could he tell her that the woman who'd haunted his nightmares was walking through his office in the flesh? How could he admit that every time he saw Elena's face, part of him didn't know whether to run or to remember? "It's just work," he said finally. Nia's eyes softened, but the quiet between them deepened, that kind of silence that didn't mean distance, but fear of breaking something fragile. She reached for his hand. "Whatever it is, don't carry it alone." He nodded, though the promise tasted like a lie. Later that night, while Nia slept, Lucas sat in his study. The rain had started again, slow, persistent. His phone buzzed. A message from Laura. "Laura. Sir, we found something. Sending files now." He opened them and froze. Elena Marine, born in Lyon, France, educated in Geneva, records spotless. But beneath the official documents were photos, grainy blurred, of her standing beside Andrew Cole outside a villa in Monaco. The timestamp 6 months ago. Andrew Cole, the man who had betrayed him and disappeared after Sheila's death. Lucas's breath hitched. Another photo followed Elena entering a clinic registered under Marin Holdings, a clinic that had once belonged to Sheila's trust. He scrolled faster until one file stopped him cold. A video labeled Legacy.mp4. He pressed play. The screen flickered. Then came a woman's voice. Soft, shaky, familiar. "Lucas, if you're seeing this, it means the past has finally found you." His heart stopped. Sheila. She was older, thinner eyes hollowed by time. But it was her. "I wanted to protect you," she said, "but Andrew never intended to let me go. If you ever meet my sister, Elena, don't hate her. She's the only reason you're still alive." The video cut to static. Lucas sat there in silence, the world spinning around, that one truth sister. Elena wasn't Sheila. She was her blood, and somehow she'd been there all along, in the shadows of every lie. The next morning, Lucas arrived at the office before dawn. The city was still half asleep, the skyline veiled in gray. Elena was already there, sitting in his chair, perfectly at ease. "You don't knock," he said quietly. "You don't sleep," she countered. He closed the door. "You have a lot of explaining to do." "So do you," she said calmly, rising to face him. "You built a company over her grave, Lucas. You turned grief into gold. Did you ever stop to wonder who paid the real price for your silence?" "Don't you dare talk about her," he snapped. "I'm not talking about her." Her voice sharpened. "I'm talking about the truth you buried with her name." He stared at her, jaw tight. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said. "But someone else does. Andrew." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, just enough to confirm it. "He's alive," Lucas said flatly. "And you're working with him." "No," she said quickly. "Not anymore. He used me. He used both of us." Lucas stepped closer, eyes cold. "You expect me to believe that?" Her breath trembled. "I expect you to listen before you destroy everything again." The crack in her voice wasn't rehearsed. It was pain, raw and real. Lucas felt it even as anger warred with disbelief. She continued, quieter now. "Andrew found me after Sheila died. He said you were planning to erase her foundation, to take everything she'd built. I believed him. I helped him move funds overseas thinking I was saving her legacy. She swallowed hard. Then I discovered the truth that he forged her death certificate, that the transfer wasn't protection. It was theft. Lucas's chest tightened. And now you expect redemption? No, she said, just a chance to make it right. He studied her for a long moment, the same eyes, the same mouth, but none of Sheila's cruelty. There was something else there, regret. Why come to me? He asked finally. Because Andrew's not finished. He's been watching you, and he knows about Nia. Lucas froze. What about her? Elena met his gaze. He doesn't just want your company anymore. He wants to destroy everything that made you human again. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like ash. Lucas turned away, walking to the window, his reflection split against the glass. The city stretched beneath him, glittering merciless. If you're lying, he said quietly, I'll end you myself. She didn't flinch. Then I suppose I should start praying you find out the truth first. For the first time, Lucas saw her not as an echo of Sheila, but as something entirely different. The shadow of what might have been. He turned back, eyes dark. You're going to tell me everything. Every name, every account, every secret you and Andrew kept. She nodded slowly. I will, but not here. Why not? Because the walls in this building listen, she whispered, and not to you. Lucas's pulse quickened. You're saying he has someone inside. She met his eyes. I'm saying he never left. The air between them thickened. Suspicion, fear, something dangerously close to trust. Outside, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, slicing through the glass walls in bands of gold and shadow. Elena stepped closer, her voice barely audible. If you want to protect her, the woman you love, you'll have to face what you refused to see. Lucas's throat tightened. And what's that? That sometimes, she said, the past doesn't come back to haunt you. It comes back to finish what you started. He stared at her, unblinking. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, the first tremor of a truth too big to contain. For years he'd believed revenge ended when silence began. But now silence had spoken, and the voice it used carried Sheila's blood. The city never really slept. Even at midnight, Manhattan pulsed with the glow of 1,000 windows, stories unfolding behind glass. But on the 58th floor of King Global Tower, the lights were dim. Only one office remained alive, a single silhouette, moving slowly across the glass wall. Lucas stood at his desk, eyes fixed on the folder Elena had left him, the one that shouldn't have existed. Names, accounts, movements, pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. Every page whispered betrayal, and yet beneath the ink, something else lingered, truth. He closed the file and pressed his fingers against his temples. Outside, the reflection in the window stared back at him, tired, distant, half a stranger. The door opened softly. Still awake, her voice quiet, steady, familiar. Nia. He turned. She stood in the doorway, hair loose, a coat wrapped around her. I figured you weren't home, she said. So I came here. Lucas tried to find his usual composure, but his voice came out lower than he meant. You shouldn't have. I know, she said. But you've been disappearing lately. And when you disappear, it usually means something's wrong. He hesitated, then gestured toward the couch. You want coffee? No, she said, crossing the room. I want honesty. Lucas's jaw tightened. I'm always honest with you. Not lately, she said softly. You've been somewhere else, even when you're here. Her eyes searched his face, patient but unyielding. Lucas looked away first. There's someone new at the company, he said finally. A bored investor. Nia waited, sensing there was more. She looks like her, he said quietly. Like Sheila. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut air. Nia didn't speak right away. She just stood there, absorbing the words, her heartbeat echoing somewhere between disbelief and fear. You mean she reminds you of her? She said at last. No, he said. I mean she is her. Or she could be. Her twin, maybe. Her sister. I don't know yet. Nia's lips parted slightly as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. And you didn't tell me I didn't want to, until I understood it myself. And do you? No, he admitted. Every time I look at her, I see the woman who destroyed me, and yet she's not the same. She knows things only Sheila could have known. She's working with Andrew Cole. He stopped, realizing his voice had risen. Nia stepped closer, her tone gentler now. Lucas, you don't have to protect me from this. I'm not protecting you, he said. I'm protecting what we've built. Her eyes softened, but her voice trembled. Then why does it feel like you're slipping away? He looked at her, then really looked at the worry behind her calm, the quiet ache of someone watching the man she loved drift into another world. Nia, he said quietly, I'm not going anywhere. She smiled, faint and sad. You already are. The next morning, the city was washed clean by rain. Nia stood by the kitchen window pouring coffee she didn't really want. The twins were playing on the floor, their laughter soft against the hum of the city below. But even their joy couldn't quiet the unease curling inside her chest. She'd always known Lucas carried ghosts, the kind that didn't leave even when the grave was full. But lately, the distance between them wasn't grief. It was something darker, something alive. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Laura Lucas's assistant. Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. King left his schedule open today. He didn't say where he's going. Thought you should know. Nia frowned. Thank you, Laura. She put on her coat before she could talk herself out of it. Lucas wasn't at the office. He wasn't at home either. It was instinct that led Nia to the old King Global Archives on the Lower East Side, a place Lucas rarely visited, except when he wanted to be alone with the past. When she arrived, the room was dimly lit, dust floating in the pale light. She found him sitting at the long table surrounded by old files, photographs, legal drafts. Looking for ghosts again, she said softly. He didn't turn. How did you find me? I followed the silence, she said simply. He almost smiled at that, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed him. I'm trying to find proof, he murmured. Of what? That I'm not losing my mind. He handed her a photograph, an image of Sheila and a woman identical to her, standing side by side. It was old, faded edges worn. I found this in the old trust archives, he said. It's dated years before I met her. It was hidden in a box under her name. Nia studied the picture. So she really had a twin. Apparently, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And she's back. But why now? Why? After all this time, Nia's gaze lingered on the two faces so alike, and yet not. There was something colder in one, softer in the other. Maybe she's not here for you, she said quietly. Maybe she's here for herself. Lucas looked up, eyes shadowed. You think she's innocent? I think people come back for reasons we don't always understand. He leaned back the chair, creaking under the weight of fatigue. You sound like her. Nia frowned. Like who, Sheila? He said, instantly regretting it. Nia's expression flickered hurt, crossing her face, before she masked it with a quiet composure. Then maybe she taught you something after all. He reached for her hand. Don't do that. Do what shut down. Her voice trembled. You're the one shutting me out, Lucas. You say you're protecting me, but what you're really doing is running back to the ghosts that almost destroyed you. He stared at her hand in his smaller, steady warmth and realized she was right. But he couldn't stop. Sheila didn't just betray me, he said. She left questions that never died. And now someone's walking around with her face, her voice, her secrets. If I don't find out the truth, she wins again. Nia's eyes glistened. And if finding that truth costs us everything, Lucas didn't answer. Because somewhere inside, he already knew the answer. That night, Nia couldn't sleep. The sound of rain against the windows felt heavier closer. She walked through the penthouse quietly, her bare feet brushing against the cool marble. Lucas's study door was half open, light spilling into the hallway. She hesitated, then pushed it open. On the desk lay the same folder he'd been studying. She didn't mean to read it, but her fingers moved on their own, flipping through reports, photos, documents stamped with names she didn't recognize. Until one did. Nia Thompson. Her heart stilled. It was a personnel file, an internal background check. Only it wasn't hers. The details were wrong: her age, her education, her address. Everything slightly distorted, as if someone had rewritten her life just enough to make it believable. And at the bottom of the page, a signature. Andrew Cole. Her pulse raced. Why was his name there? Why would Lucas's greatest enemy have access to her past? She sank into the chair, staring at the papers as 1,000 questions collided in her mind. Was it possible she'd been part of something she didn't even know? That her arrival in Lucas's life wasn't fate, but design? The sound of footsteps behind her made her flinch. Couldn't sleep. Lucas's voice was calm, but she could hear the fatigue beneath it. She turned, eyes wide. Lucas, what is this? He looked at the folder in her hand and went still. You weren't supposed to see that. Then tell me why it exists. He hesitated, jaw tightening. Because Andrew Cole knew who you were before I did. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying you were in his network years ago. Your volunteer records at the shelter, your work history, they all lead back to foundations he funded under different names. Nia shook her head slowly. No, that's not possible. I didn't want to believe it either, he said. But I found the transfers. Your first salary at the diner was paid from one of his accounts. Her voice broke. You think I was part of his plan? I think, Lucas said softly. You were someone he chose for a reason, maybe even without your knowing. Tears welled in her eyes. You think he sent me to you? Lucas didn't answer. His silence was worse than accusation. She stepped back, shaking. After everything we've been through, after everything I've given you, still think I could be like them? Nia. No, she said, her voice trembling. You don't get to doubt me because of your ghosts. Her words cracked something inside him. He reached for her, but she stepped away. Don't, she whispered. If you touch me now, I'll break. The rain hit the glass harder, wind howling through the city like a warning. Lucas stood there helpless, watching the woman who had become his anchor unravel in front of him. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, she said softly. You always think love is a transaction-proof evidence control. But love doesn't survive on suspicion, Lucas. It survives on trust. He closed his eyes. I do trust you. Then prove it, she whispered. Silence stretched between them, long and merciless. When she finally turned toward the door, her voice was quiet but steady. You want to find the truth about Sheila and Elena? Then do it. But don't come looking for me until you decide which world you actually live in, the one with the dead or the one with the living. And then she was gone. Lucas stood in the empty room, the echo of her footsteps fading into the storm. For the first time since the night Sheila died, He felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Fear. Not of loss, but of deserving it. He walked to the window, his reflection fractured by the rain, and whispered to no one. What have I done? The city below shimmered with a cruel kind of beauty, bright, indifferent, endless, and somewhere beyond that glittering skyline, a shadow moved. Elena Marine watched from the back seat of a black car, eyes fixed on the tower. She whispered to the man beside her, a man whose face was hidden by darkness. She's starting to doubt him. The man's voice was smooth, familiar, poisonous. Good. Doubt is the crack that breaks kings. Andrew Cole smiled. And when he falls, we'll both be there to watch. The sun rose late that morning, reluctant and pale, like even the sky hesitated to look down at the mess unraveling beneath it. Lucas King sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by silence and the ghosts of too many truths. His reflection in the glass wall looked nothing like the man Manhattan believed him to be, no longer composed, no longer untouchable, but cracked in places only he could see. He hadn't slept. He hadn't called Nia. Every word she'd said last night still echoed inside him like a slow bleed. Love doesn't survive on suspicion. She was right, but right didn't make it easier. The intercom buzzed softly. Laura's voice came through, hesitant. Sir, there's a package for you. Hand delivered. No sender. Lucas frowned. From where the lobby guard said the courier wouldn't say a word. Just left it. Bring it up. Minutes later, the small parcel sat on his desk, brown paper tied with a thin red string. No label, no name. Only his. He untied it slowly, the sound of tearing paper impossibly loud in the quiet room. Inside lay a single USB drive and a handwritten note on ivory stationery. For every kingdom built on secrets, there is always a price. Play me. No signature. Lucas stared at it for a long moment before sliding the drive into his laptop. The screen blinked. Then came a video, grainy, time-stamped from years ago. Sheila's voice. He froze. The contract's done, she was saying to someone off camera. He'll sign the transfer tomorrow. He won't even read it. He never does when he thinks it's for us. Then another voice answered. Andrew Cole's. Calm, amused. You underestimate him, darling. I know exactly who I married, she said coldly. A man who confuses trust with love. That's what makes him easy to control. Lucas's breath caught. His heart began to pound, that old familiar ache crawling back under his skin. The camera shifted, showing the edge of a document, the header visible. King Global Corporation Equity Transfer Agreement. His own signature glimmered faintly at the bottom of the page. Sheila leaned back, lighting a cigarette. 40% of the company, locked under the trust. When I'm gone, it goes to the heir, if one ever exists. Andrew chuckled. You don't have children, Sheila. Her smile was slow, dangerous. Not yet. The video cut out. Lucas sat frozen, the silence in the room louder than thunder. His hand trembled against the desk. The faint hum of the city below felt cruel life going on, while his was coming undone again. Not yet. The words echoed. The implication was clear. Sheila had prepared for something before she died. A child. A claim, another layer of deceit he hadn't seen coming. He closed the laptop and leaned back, pressing both hands over his face. The door opened quietly behind him. You're not answering your phone, Laura said softly. Ms. Marin is here. Lucas looked up sharply. Send her away. She said it's urgent. He hesitated, then exhaled. Fine. 2 minutes. When Elena walked in, she didn't look triumphant as she usually did. She looked shaken. There was no perfume today, no charm, just exhaustion written into every line of her face. "You've seen it," she said before he could speak. He stood slowly. "You sent it." "I didn't," she said. "Andrew did. I came to warn you before he makes the next move." Lucas's voice hardened. "And what move is that? He's activating the clause." "What clause?" Elena met his gaze. "The air clause." Lucas stared at her, the air leaving his lungs. "You expect me to believe there's a child?" "There is," she said quietly, "and Andrew has him." The silence stretched until even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Lucas's voice dropped cold and steady. "You're lying." "I wish I were," she whispered. "Sheila was pregnant when she disappeared. She didn't tell you because she thought you'd never forgive her for how it happened." "How? What happened?" Elena swallowed hard. "The child isn't yours, Lucas." The words landed like a physical blow. He turned away, every muscle in his body coiled tight. "Get out. Listen to me," she pleaded. "You're not the only one she betrayed. Andrew used her, used me. He built everything around that child. It's not about blood anymore. It's about control." Control. Lucas's voice cracked with bitter laughter. That's what this was always about. Money, power, legacy, the same language she spoke before she died. "She's dead because she tried to undo it," Elena said, "because she realized what she'd created." He spun toward her. "And now what? You think I'll believe you came here to save me?" Elena stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "No, I came here to save what's left of her name, and maybe yours too." Lucas wanted to hate her. God knew he should. But something in her tone, quiet, sincere, pained, rooted him to the floor. He sank into the chair behind his desk, staring at the documents scattered before him. "You said there's a child." "Yes." "How old?" "8, she whispered. "His name is Eli." Lucas's gaze flicked upward. "Where?" "Switzerland." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "And you expect me to just accept that I expect you to find the truth," she said softly. "Because if you don't, Andrew will. And when he does, that boy becomes the rightful heir to 40% of King Global." Lucas went still. The room felt colder suddenly, the weight of her words sinking deep. "You're saying he's coming for my company?" "No," she said. "He's coming for your life." That night, Lucas drove aimlessly through the city. The streets blurred past in ribbons of neon and shadow. Every red light, every reflection in the glass, felt like an accusation. He pulled over by the river, the same place he'd once promised himself he'd never return to. The water below was dark, restless. He thought of Nia, of her voice. "You don't have to carry it alone." And yet, here he was, alone again, carrying what no one else could. When his phone rang, he almost didn't answer, but the name on the screen made his heart stop. Nia. He hesitated before picking up. Nia, her voice was quiet, tired. "You're alive. Why wouldn't I be? Because you vanished for 2 days, Lucas." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix silence," she said. "What's happening to us?" He didn't know how to answer that. "I found something," he said, finally. "Something about Sheila, about her past. I thought the past was buried. So did I." Nia's breath wavered through the line. "And now it's rewriting everything I thought I knew." There was a pause. "Do you still want me in your life, Lucas?" Her question landed softly, but it cut deep. He wanted to tell her, yes, wanted to say it the way he used to say her name in the dark, when everything felt simple. but the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere inside him, the foundation was already cracking. Nia whispered, "If you're not sure, just say it." "I'm sure," he said, voice low. "But I don't know if it's enough anymore." The line went silent. When she finally spoke again, her tone had changed. "Then I'll stop waiting for a man who doesn't know where he belongs." And before he could speak, the call ended. Lucas sat in the car, the sound of the rain swallowing everything else. By dawn, he was back at the office. Laura was waiting with an envelope. "A delivery came for you overnight. No return address again." Lucas hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a birth certificate. Eli Cole. Born Geneva, Switzerland. Mother Sheila King. Father Andrew Cole. His pulse stuttered. The paper trembled in his hands, not from shock, but from something worse. Because at the bottom of the document, written in Sheila's handwriting, were 3 words. "Forgive me, Lucas." He sank into the chair, unable to breathe. For a moment, the office blurred walls, bending light, distorting. The door opened quietly, but he didn't look up. Nia's voice broke the silence. "You're not the man I met anymore." He lifted his head. She stood there, framed by the morning light, tears drying on her cheeks. "I came to say goodbye," she said, "but I had to see your face one more time, to know if the man I loved is still somewhere under all this." Lucas's throat tightened. "Nia, please." "Don't," she said softly. "You've been living in a war that ended years ago. You keep trying to save what's already burned." He stood, crossing to her, his voice rough. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" she whispered. "From the truth or from yourself?" He reached for her, but she stepped back. "I don't know who you're fighting anymore, Lucas. Her ghost. Her sister, or the part of yourself that still loves what destroyed you." The words hit him like a final blow. Not cruel, just honest. She turned toward the door. "When you decide what's real, you'll know where to find me." And then she was gone. Lucas stood there for a long time, the city waking around him, his world narrowing into silence. He looked down at the paper still trembling in his hands, at the name that wasn't his, but carried his ruin. Eli Cole. A child he'd never known existed, a legacy that could undo everything he'd built. But as the first rays of light cut across the skyline, Lucas felt something stir inside him, not despair, but determination. Because beneath the pain, beneath the loss, one truth had crystallized with brutal clarity. If Sheila's child existed, so did her final lie. And he was done letting ghosts decide how his story would end. The city that once adored Lucas King now turned its back on him. It began quietly, a headline, buried in a mid-tier business paper. Anonymous leak suggests CEO's empire, built on forged legacy. Then another louder, more venomous. The ghost of Sheila King returns, and she wants her share. By the end of the week, the story was everywhere. Screens on Wall Street flashed his face, beside words like fraud, deception, and secret heir. The stock plummeted 15% overnight. The empire he'd built from steel and silence was bleeding faster than he could stop it. Lucas read every line in silence. He didn't need to guess who orchestrated it. The tone, the precision, the cruelty were all Andrew Cole's signatures. But what gutted him wasn't the lie in the papers. It was the truth beneath it. He had signed the trust. He had left the hole that now threatened to swallow him whole. And now he had no one to blame but himself. He closed the laptop and looked out over the skyline. The morning light was thin, the kind that made everything look distant and unforgiving. The office behind him was empty. Most of the board had called for an emergency meeting without him. The others had simply stopped answering his calls. Only Laura remained. She stood by the doorway, hesitant. "Sir, there's something you should see." Lucas turned. Another headline. "Worse," she said softly, holding out her tablet. "It's trending on every platform." He took the device. The video was short, 30 seconds of edited footage, showing him and Elena at a restaurant, captured from across the street. The angle was just right, the lighting intimate. In the clip, she leaned forward, touching his hand briefly. The voiceover whispered, "Poison billionaire king's secret meetings with the wife he claimed was dead, while his current partner remains in the dark." The clip ended with a blurred photo of Nia walking through the hospital with the twins, looking lost, fragile, and utterly human. Lucas felt something in him twist. Who leaked this? Laura hesitated. The metadata traces back to an internal system. Someone from King Global. He looked up sharply. Who? She swallowed. Nia's clearance code was used. For a second, he couldn't move. The air thickened. "That's impossible." "I checked twice," Laura said. "It's her access log." Lucas's voice dropped dangerously calm. "Get me the full audit trail." When she left, he leaned against the desk, his pulse hammering in his ears. He wanted to believe it wasn't true that Nia would never betray him. But the thought had already been planted, and once doubt entered, it didn't leave. His phone buzzed. A new message unmarked. "You should learn to check who sleeps beside you, Lucas. Not every angel is sent to save you." Attached was a single photo, Nia sitting in a cafe speaking to a man whose face was half turned away. But Lucas recognized him instantly. Andrew Cole. His breath caught. Nia didn't expect him to come home that night. She sat by the window, still dressed from work, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. The twins were asleep, their soft breathing, the only proof that some part of her life was still innocent. When she heard the door unlock, she turned quickly, relief flashing in her eyes. "Lucas, don't," he said, his tone cutting through the air like glass. She froze. The look on his face was one she'd never seen, cold, restrained, and tired in a way that went beyond exhaustion. He closed the door behind him and tossed his phone on the table. "Where were you this afternoon?" She blinked. "Work." "Why?" "Try again. I told you I was with him." He interrupted. The silence that followed was worse than any denial. "Lucas," she began carefully. "Whatever you think you saw, I don't think," he snapped. "I saw." She took a slow breath. "You mean Andrew Cole?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Nia met his gaze unflinching. "He came to find me, not the other way around. And you thought it best not to tell me I was going to," she said quietly. "But you've been living in a war I don't understand. Every time I try to help you push me out. I thought if I met him, I could find out what he wants. And what does he want?" Nia, her eyes darkened. "You." Lucas's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Of course he does. He said you're fighting a battle you can't win." She went on. "That Elena isn't the enemy, that she's the key to everything. Did you believe him?" "I didn't know what to believe," she said, "but I knew I needed to hear it from him, not through another headline." Lucas paced to the window, his hands clenched. "You don't understand what you've done." "I do," she said softly. "I've given you a reason to be angry again." He turned sharply. "This isn't about anger. This is about betrayal." She flinched as if struck. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "The leak, the access logs, it came from your code." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "That's not possible. Check it yourself. I don't have to," she said, stepping closer. "Because I know me. I would never hurt you." He looked at her, then eyes unreadable. I used to say the same thing about Sheila. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The moment they did, he wanted to take them back, but it was too late. Naya went pale. So, that's what I am to you now. Another mistake with the wrong face. Nia. No, she said, her voice breaking, but steady. Don't. I know that tone. It's the one you used when you decided to stop loving her, when you told yourself you were above pain. She reached for her coat. Where are you going away? She said quietly, before you start believing the lie enough to make it true. He wanted to stop her, to grab her hand, to say something that would undo the damage, but pride and fear both stood in the way. When the door closed, the silence it left behind was worse than any scream. 2 days later, the board voted to suspend Lucas King from executive duties pending internal investigation. His name was now worth less than the scandal that bore it. He signed the papers without argument. Elena found him sitting alone in the boardroom afterward, staring at the empty chairs that had once bent to his will. You knew this was coming, she said softly. Knowing doesn't make it easier. She hesitated. I'm sorry. He laughed under his breath. You're sorry for a storm you helped start. Her expression flickered with something like guilt. I didn't know Andrew would go this far. Lucas looked at her, tired but sharp. You always know, Elena. You're just good at pretending you don't. I came to tell you something, she said. Before he does. He waited. The child Eli, he's real. But what Andrew didn't tell you is that Sheila left something behind. A letter. It was addressed to me, but it was meant for you. She slid an envelope across the table. Lucas stared at it for a moment before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakable, graceful, deliberate. Lucas, if you're reading this, you've already learned what I did. You have every right to hate me. But know this, nothing between us was a lie, even if everything around us was. I tried to protect what we built, but I made the wrong bargain. Andrew offered safety. I mistook it for salvation. When I realized what I'd given him, it was too late. But I left one thing undone, one clause unsigned. Find it and you'll find the truth about Eli. Forgive me if you can. I never stopped loving you. Sheila. Lucas read it twice, every word cutting deeper than the last. When he looked up, his voice was rough. You expect me to believe her now? Elena's eyes glistened. No, but you should at least see what she left behind. She slid another document toward him, the original contract. Half-burned edges, singed but legible. And there it was, an unsigned clause at the bottom, a missing signature, where Sheila's should have been. What is it, he asked. Elena hesitated. A clause that gives full inheritance to the legitimate spouse, if no heir is confirmed, which means the company is still legally yours. Lucas felt the ground shift. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? Because Andrew found out first, she said quietly. And he's not after your company anymore. He's after the clause itself. He stared at her. What do you mean? She met his gaze, voice barely above a whisper. He's coming for Nia. He thinks she has it. Lucas's chest tightened. Why would she? Because she's the one person you still trust enough to hide things from yourself, Elena said softly. And Andrew knows that. The realization hit him like a blade, swift, merciless. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping the marble floor. Where is she? Elena hesitated. I don't know. She left the city 2 nights ago. But he's tracking her. Lucas's voice dropped deadly calm. Then we find her first. Elena reached for him. Lucas, if you go after him now. He turned, eyes dark with resolve. If he touches her, I won't stop at justice. She held his gaze for a long, silent moment. Then I'll come with you. He almost smiled, bitter, fleeting. Why? Because if you're going to burn the past, she said, you shouldn't do it alone. They left the boardroom together, two ghosts bound by the same ruin walking into a storm neither could escape. Outside New York shimmered with cold sunlight, the kind that didn't warm, only exposed. Somewhere across the ocean, a child named Eli was being guarded by a man who once called Lucas his brother. And somewhere closer, Nia ran through the city, unaware that she was no longer a woman he loved, but the final piece of a game that had begun long before she ever walked into his life. The rain in Geneva didn't fall. It whispered, a gray, delicate kind of rain that softened the edges of the world, as if the city itself was trying to keep its secrets. Lucas stood beneath the awning of a quiet orphanage on Rue du Rhône, his coat still damp from travel, his pulse steady but heavy. Elena stood beside him silent, her gaze fixed on the brass sign above the door, Maison St. Clair, Home for Lost Children. This is where Sheila brought him, she said quietly. Eli was registered here under her maiden name. After that, Andrew took him away. Lucas's voice was low. And you're sure? Elena nodded. I was there the day she signed the papers. She didn't want him to live in the shadow of her mistakes. He stared at the rain-slicked street. And yet here we are chasing the shadow anyway. The nun who answered the door recognized Elena instantly. Mademoiselle Marin, she said softly in French. It's been years. Elena inclined her head. We're looking for a boy named Eli. About 8 now. The nun hesitated, glancing at Lucas, then back at Elena. Follow me. The corridor smelled faintly of wax and lavender. The walls were lined with children's drawings, stick figures, suns, blue skies, all of it too innocent for the kind of truth waiting behind closed doors. They stopped outside a room at the end of the hall. He comes here sometimes, the nun whispered, with a man who claims to be his guardian. They bring gifts, never names. Lucas's throat tightened. Is he here now? She nodded. Yes, just arrived this morning. The door opened before he could speak. A small boy ran past, laughter echoing down the corridor. His hair was dark, his eyes a startling gray. Sharp, intelligent, far older than his years. Lucas froze. It was like looking into a mirror that had never known pain. Behind the boy, a man stepped into view. Tailored suit, calm smile, the kind of face that once inspired trust. Andrew Cole. Lucas, he said easily as if greeting an old friend. You look tired. Lucas's jaw tightened. You look alive. Disappointing. Andrew's smile deepened. And here I thought you'd be happy to see me. Eli peeked from behind him, curious. Who is he? Lucas's heart caught at the sound, the softness, the innocence. You must be Eli. Andrew rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Run along, son. Sister Margaret is waiting with your books. When the boy left, the room felt smaller. The air thickened. You shouldn't be here, Andrew said. You made sure I would be. Lucas replied, You've been pulling the strings since the beginning. The leaks, the scandal. Nia Andrew raised a brow. Ah, yes, the lovely Ms. Thompson. She has a gift for loyalty, doesn't she? Shame it's wasted on you. Don't talk about her. Lucas said, his voice sharp enough to cut. Andrew laughed softly. Still the same, always ruled by sentiment. You should thank me, really. I gave you a reason to feel alive again. Lucas stepped closer, his words steady but lethal. You stole my wife. You forged my name. You turned my company into a weapon. If you think I'll thank you for that, I didn't steal her. Andrew interrupted calmly. She came to me. And you know why? Because she saw the truth long before you did, that everything you built was made of glass. She died because of you. Andrew's smile faded, his tone sharpening. No, Lucas. She died because she realized what she'd done. The child was her way of making peace with it. You were never supposed to find him. And yet, here I am. Yes, Andrew said softly. Here you are chasing ghosts, while the world you built burns behind you. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling with contained anger. You used him, Andrew. You used all of us. You lied to Sheila, to Lucas, to me, lied. Andrew turned toward her, eyes narrowing. No, Elena. I simply gave each of you what you wanted most. Sheila wanted forgiveness. You wanted purpose, and Lucas... He smiled again cruelly. Lucas wanted to be a hero in a story that never belonged to him. Lucas didn't move. Where is the boy's mother's will? Andrew shrugged. Gone. Like everything else that kept you safe. You forged the documents. You hid her letter. Andrew's smile was almost pitying. You still think this is about papers and inheritance. You don't understand, Lucas. You were always the product, the face that made people believe. Sheila and I built the empire. You were just the mask it wore. Lucas's voice was barely above a whisper. You're wrong. Andrew leaned closer, his breath a whisper against the storm outside. Then prove it. The silence between them stretched like a blade. And then Lucas moved fast, sudden. He grabbed Andrew by the collar, slamming him against the wall. The nun gasped, but no one stepped in. You want proof? Lucas hissed. It's standing right here, breathing, fighting, surviving everything you tried to destroy. Andrew didn't resist. His smile didn't waver. You're late, Lucas. You always were. While you're busy playing the hero, I've already won. Won what Eli's trust. His inheritance, his future. Lucas's grip tightened. He's just a child. Andrew's voice lowered. A child who will grow into my legacy, not yours. A sound broke the tension, a soft voice from the doorway. Papa Lucas froze. Eli stood there, eyes wide. Andrew smiled gently. It's all right, son. Just an old friend. Lucas released him slowly, his breath uneven. Don't call him that, he said quietly. Andrew crouched beside Eli, smoothing his hair. Go back to Sister Margaret. When the boy hesitated, Andrew's tone softened. Please. Eli nodded, glancing one last time at Lucas, before disappearing down the hall. Lucas turned back, voice low. You won't touch him again. Andrew adjusted his jacket, calm as ever. He's my son. He's her son, Lucas said, and that makes him my responsibility. Andrew chuckled. You really haven't changed, always trying to fix what was never yours to fix. He took a step closer, his tone almost intimate. Sheila used to say, you saw the world in absolute's love or betrayal, truth or lie. That's why she left Lucas. Not for me, for freedom. Lucas's expression didn't waver. Freedom doesn't make her innocent. No, Andrew said. But it made her human. He turned to go, then paused. You can keep chasing redemption if it helps you sleep, but when the board votes next week, King Global will belong to Eli and to me. That was Sheila's final wish, and you can't rewrite the dead. When he left the room, felt colder. The rain outside turned to sleet, tapping against the window like the ticking of a clock that refused to stop. Elena exhaled shakily. You can't let him take the company. Lucas didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the empty doorway where Eli had stood. He's using that boy like a pawn. He'll destroy him, she said softly, just like he destroyed her. Lucas's voice hardened. Not if I get to him first. Lucas. He turned to her, his eyes burning with something new. Not rage, not grief, but resolve. You said Sheila left one clause unsigned. If that's true, I can still fight this. But I need proof. Elena nodded slowly. There's one place left. The clinic she founded in Lausanne. She kept everything there. Documents, records, her journals. Then that's where we start. She touched his arm lightly. If we go there, there's no turning back. There hasn't been a way back for years. They left together, the rain closing behind them, like a curtain. The clinic sat on a quiet hill overlooking Lake Geneva, white walls, ivy climbing its sides, the kind of place that once promised healing. Inside, dust covered everything. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and memory. Elena led him to an old office at the end of the hall. The door creaked open. Inside, boxes were stacked neatly labeled in Sheila's handwriting. Lucas picked one up, his fingers, brushing over her name. She never let me see this part of her life. Because she was hiding from herself, Elena said softly. We all were. They opened the boxes in silence. Old ledgers, photos, fragments of another life. Then, at the bottom of the last one, Lucas found a small black envelope sealed with wax. His heart thudded. He broke it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a flash drive. The paper read, "If anything happens to me, the file enclosed holds my confession. To Andrew, to Lucas, to Eli. The truth you'll both hate, but the only one that matters." Lucas stared at the words until they blurred. Then he plugged the drive into the nearby laptop. A video appeared. Sheila older, tired, her beauty touched by regret. I don't know who will watch this, she began, her voice trembling. But if it's Lucas, I'm sorry. I thought love could be rebuilt from lies. I was wrong. Andrew made me believe you'd abandon me if you knew the child wasn't yours. But what I didn't know was that he used my fear to steal from both of us. She paused, tears glistening. Eli is your son, Lucas, not by blood, by choice. You were the man I loved, the man who deserved to be his father. I couldn't let Andrew raise him, so I made Elena promise to protect him if I couldn't. Lucas's breath hitched. She continued, her voice breaking. If Andrew ever finds this, he'll use Eli to finish what he started. Don't let him. Save our son. The video ended. For a long moment, Lucas didn't move. The truth hung between them, like fragile glass, devastating, beautiful, irreversible. Elena's voice was barely audible. I didn't know she recorded that. Lucas closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. Then this is it. This is the proof. He turned toward the window, watching the rain blur the world outside. Andrew wanted to take everything. But now, I know what I'm fighting for. Elena's gaze softened. Not revenge. He shook his head. For him, for Eli. She smiled faintly. Then you finally understand. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, he saw not Sheila's reflection, but someone who had carried her ghost long enough. Outside, the storm broke. The first light of dawn spilled across the lake, washing the world in quiet gold. Lucas whispered almost to himself, I'm coming for you, Andrew. But this time it won't be for vengeance. Elena's voice trembled. Then for what? He turned to her, his expression calm, resolute. For the truth and for my son. Snow fell like dust over Lausanne, soft and unending, covering the scars of the earth in quiet grace. The city was a blur of white and gold beneath the early morning light. But Lucas didn't notice any of it. He stood by the window of a modest inn overlooking the lake, eyes tracing the horizon that had swallowed too many of his ghosts. Eli's voice from the recording still haunted him. The small laughter in the background of Sheila's confession, the sound of innocence untouched by betrayal. That voice had become his anchor and his curse. Behind him, Elena packed the last of their papers into a leather bag. "The train leaves in 40 minutes, she said softly. "If we want to reach Zurich before dark, we should go." Lucas didn't turn. "Andrew's not going to wait for us to play catch-up. He won't make his move until the vote." Elena said, her tone calm but firm. "He wants the spectacle. He wants to win in daylight." Lucas finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "And you? What about me? Where do you stand when the light hits?" Her hands paused over the clasp of the bag. "I stand where the truth does," she said quietly. He studied her, searching for any trace of deceit, but all he found was exhaustion, the kind that came from years of carrying the sins of others. They left the inn without another word. The streets were slick, the cold biting. As they crossed toward the station, Lucas glanced up. A billboard blazed his name in bold letters. King Global, under fire. The caption below twisted like a knife. Love, lies, and legacy. The fall of a billionaire. He tore his gaze away, jaw tight. Elena followed his line of sight. "You can still change the ending," she murmured. He didn't answer, but the way his fists tightened was answer enough. The train hummed through the Alps, winding past fields of untouched snow. For the first time in weeks, silence stretched between them, without the weight of accusation. Elena stared out the window. "Do you ever think about what forgiveness costs?" Lucas's gaze was on the reflection of the mountains. "Too often. And it's expensive," he said, "but not as expensive as guilt." She turned slightly, watching him. "You still think this ends with revenge?" "I think it ends with peace," he said, his voice low. "Whatever form that takes." Elena smiled faintly. "Peace and revenge don't share the same road." "They do," he said, meeting her eyes. "For men like me." The sound of the wheels on the track filled the silence. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed from a passing village. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled slightly. "You know she loved you." Lucas looked away. "She lied to me. She lied to everyone. But love wasn't one of her lies." He didn't reply, but his reflection in the window softened just a little, like ice under the first touch of spring. By the time they reached Zurich, dusk had settled over the city. The King Global European branch towered over the skyline, glass and steel and arrogance, the empire that had once been his. Security lights flickered across the marble plaza. Lucas turned to Elena. "He'll be inside, waiting." "Then we give him what he wants," she said. Lucas frowned. "And what's that?" She met his gaze, eyes steady. "You." Before he could respond, the lobby doors opened. Andrew stepped out, immaculate as ever, flanked by 2 guards. His smile was almost warm. "Right on time," he said. "I was starting to worry you'd lost your touch." Lucas's expression didn't change. "You always liked theatrics." Andrew spread his hands. "And you always liked to pretend you were above them." He gestured toward the lobby. "Shall we?" They followed him inside. The building was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that felt staged. In the conference room, papers were already laid out on the long table, contracts, ownership documents, and one sealed envelope with the King Global crest. Andrew poured himself a drink. "You've seen the letter. You know what it means." "I saw a recording," Lucas corrected. "One that proves Eli's my son." Andrew's laugh was soft, almost indulgent. "Biology is a technicality. What matters is what's written in ink." He slid a folder across the table. "Sheila's final addendum. dated 6 months before her death. It names me as Eli's legal guardian and executor of her trust. Lucas didn't touch it. Forgery. Proof, Andrew countered. Lucas leaned forward. I have her confession. Her video. She admitted you manipulated her. Andrew's smile faltered for the first time. You think anyone will believe that a grainy recording from a dead woman versus signed documents and a clean trail, the board already has copies. By morning, the vote will be unanimous. Lucas's voice lowered. You're forgetting something. Oh. She left one clause unsigned, Lucas said, the one that names a legitimate heir. Andrew's brow twitched. Lucas smiled, slow and deliberate. And I have the original copy, the one she hid in Lausanne. Without her signature, your entire claim collapses. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Andrew's calm fractured. He turned sharply to Elena. You did this. Elena met his fury with quiet defiance. I finished what she started. Andrew's voice dripped venom. You think helping him redeems you? You betrayed me for a man who once called you a ghost. She didn't flinch. Maybe I got tired of haunting the wrong people. Andrew's eyes hardened. You'll regret that. Before anyone could move, one of the guards stepped forward, reaching for something inside his coat. Lucas's instincts kicked in. Years of boardroom wars had taught him what danger felt like, even without a weapon in sight. Don't, Lucas warned. Andrew raised a hand, stopping the guard. His composure returned, like a mask snapping back into place. This isn't over, he said smoothly. You may win today, but the world loves a scandal more than the truth. By next week, you'll be a headline again, the desperate billionaire chasing a child that was never his. Lucas's reply was quiet, deliberate. Maybe. But I'd rather be a man who fights for something real than one who hides behind lies. Andrew stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're not a father, Lucas. You never were. That boy will forget you by next year. Lucas's jaw clenched. Then I'll remind him every day until he can't. For the first time, Andrew's expression cracked a flicker of something raw and almost human. Then he turned, signaling to his guards. We're done here. When they left, the room fell into silence. Elena exhaled, trembling. You took a risk showing your hand. Lucas nodded slowly. Sometimes the only way to win is to let them think they already have. She frowned. You mean the document isn't with me, he said quietly. It's with Nia. Elena blinked. You trust her after everything, he met her gaze. Trust isn't about never doubting someone. It's about believing them even when you do. Elena's eyes softened. Then she's in danger. I know, he said, which is why I'm going to bring her back. The next morning, a call came through on an encrypted line. A distorted voice, Andrews spoke first. You shouldn't have crossed me. Lucas's tone was calm. You should have learned when to stop. Andrew chuckled. She's with me, you know. Nia. She wanted to save you. She's brave. I'll give her that. Lucas froze. What did you do? Nothing yet. Andrew said, his tone casual, almost playful. But we both know bravery only lasts as long as hope. You want her back. Bring me the document, the one Sheila hid. Lucas's voice dropped to a whisper. You touch her, and I'll kill me. Andrew laughed softly. You'd lose what little soul you have left. The line went dead. Lucas stood still, the phone trembling in his hand. Elena watched him, eyes wide. Where is he? Lucas turned toward the window, the morning sun slicing across his face. Where he's always been, he said, hiding in plain sight. You know where? He nodded slowly. Geneva, the villa they shared, where it all began. Elena grabbed her coat. Then let's go. Lucas hesitated, his voice almost tender. No, I go alone. Lucas. He shook his head. You've done enough. This isn't your war. Her eyes glistened. Maybe not, but it's my redemption. He looked at her, really looked, then gave a small nod. Then we end it together. By nightfall, the villa stood before them, grand, abandoned, still beautiful in its decay. The same house where Sheila had once smiled for photographs that lied about their happiness. Snow blanketed the steps. Light glowed faintly through one window. Lucas pushed the door open. Inside, the air was cold, stale, thick with memory. And there, in the center of the room, stood Andrew. Nia was tied to a chair, her wrists bound, but her gaze steady, unbroken. Lucas's voice was a growl. Let her go. Andrew smiled. Ah, the hero arrives. This ends tonight, Lucas said. Andrew tilted his head. You always did love endings. Unfortunately, this one's already written. He raised his hand. A gun glinted under the chandelier's fractured light. Nia's voice broke the silence, soft, but steady. Lucas, don't. Andrew smirked. She still thinks you're worth saving. Lucas's tone was quiet, absolute. She's right. The room went still. The snow outside kept falling, the night closing in like a secret. And for the first time, Lucas King felt no fear, only clarity. He wasn't fighting for legacy anymore, or forgiveness, or even vengeance. He was fighting for love, the kind that refused to die, even when everything else did. The storm that had carried them to this moment had finally gone quiet. Snow melted into mist along the villa's stone terrace, and the lake shimmered beneath a sky that looked newly born. But inside, the air was still tense, too heavy for peace, too fragile for war. Lucas stood in the center of the grand hall, gun pointed at Andrew Cole, hand steady, though his heart was not. Nia sat bound to a chair behind him, her wrists red, her eyes defiant. And in the far corner, Elena watched everything unfold with that unspoken grief of someone who had seen this ending long before it began. Andrew smirked even now. You think you can shoot me, Lucas? In front of her. You think that makes you a savior? Lucas's voice was quiet, controlled. No. It makes me a man who's done running. Andrew laughed softly, stepping closer. You were always dramatic. Do you even know what you're fighting for anymore? Lucas's tone sharpened. For what's mine? Andrew's eyes flicked toward Nia, then back to him. Is she yours too, or just another beautiful casualty on your path to redemption? Nia flinched. Lucas didn't move. You should stop talking. Andrew's smile thinned. Oh, but that's what I do best. Talk, manipulate, win. You think I'm the villain in your little tragedy, but you forget I made you. Every empire you've ever touched has my fingerprints on it. Even your conscience was something I built and then broke. Lucas lowered the gun slowly, his voice colder now. Then maybe it's time to dismantle the architect. He pulled the trigger. The sound tore through the hall, a single echo that lingered long after the smoke cleared. But when it did, Andrew was still standing. A sharp gasp filled the air. Behind him, Elena stumbled back, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her coat, dark and sudden. God, Elena, Nia cried. Lucas's world tilted. He dropped the gun and caught her before she fell. Her lips were pale, her breath shallow, but her eyes were calm. I moved, she whispered, voice thin. He aimed first. Lucas looked up. Andrew stood frozen, the weapon in his hand, trembling. His confidence cracked at the edges. Why, Lucas asked quietly, his voice shaking. Why her Andrew's composure shattered completely. Because she betrayed me. Because she was supposed to love me. Elena smiled weakly. You never knew what love was, Andrew. He raised the gun again, but Nia had already moved. In a flash, she grabbed the fallen pistol from the floor and pointed it at him, her hands steady in a way Lucas had never seen before. Don't, she said softly. Don't make him become you. Andrew looked between them. Nia steady as stone, Lucas, kneeling beside the woman who had saved him twice, and Elena, her life, slipping away one breath at a time. For a brief second, he almost seemed human again. Then he laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think this ends with mercy? You think she forgave you? None of you understand. Sheila's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't love. It was choice. Lucas's head snapped up. What did you say? Andrew's smile was cruel. She knew I'd kill her, and she wanted it. Said it was the only way you'd ever learn what freedom feels like. The words hit Lucas like a blow, but before he could speak, Nia fired. The gunshot was softer this time, less rage, more inevitability. Andrew staggered, his expression stunned, and for a moment the great manipulator looked small. She promised me. Then he fell. The silence afterward was so thick, it seemed to swallow sound itself. Nia's hand trembled. The gun dropped to the marble with a dull clatter. She turned to Lucas, eyes wide as if realizing what she'd done, only after it was over. He stood slowly, the weight of everything pressing down at once. It's over, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena smiled faintly. Not yet. He knelt beside her again. You're going to be fine. She laughed softly. Don't lie to me now, Lucas. He took her hand, desperate. You don't get to die for my mistakes. Her voice was weak but sure. I'm not dying for you. I'm dying for peace, for her, for the boy. Tears blurred his vision. You saved him once already. Then save him again, she whispered. Don't let him grow up learning love through loss like we did. Her hand slipped from his. Lucas stayed there for a long time, holding her as the light faded from her eyes until the snow outside began to fall again. Days later, the villa was sealed off by Swiss authorities. The newspapers called it the King Affair, the story of love and betrayal that ended with blood on the marble floor and redemption tangled in grief. But the real story, the one that mattered, never made the headlines. Eli was safe. That was all that counted. Lucas found him at the orphanage 2 weeks later, sitting by the window, tracing fog circles on the glass with his finger. When he turned, those gray eyes looked at Lucas with quiet curiosity. You're him, the boy said. Lucas smiled faintly. Who do you think I am? The man from the picture, Eli said. Mama used to keep it in her book. Lucas's breath caught. She told you about me, the boy nodded. She said you'd come when it was time. He knelt down, his voice trembling. She was right. They sat there for a long time, just looking at each other. Two lives divided by years of lies and finally bridged by truth. When Eli reached out and took his hand, Lucas didn't pull away. Back in New York, winter had softened into spring. The city buzzed again, indifferent to the ghosts it once buried. King Global had survived the scandal, though its power had shifted. Lucas stepped down quietly, handing control to a board chosen for integrity rather than loyalty. The headlines called it redemption. He just called it closure. One afternoon, Nia stood with him on the terrace overlooking the East River. The sun dipped low, the city painted in gold. You didn't have to give it all up, she said gently. He smiled faintly. Maybe I finally learned how to. She studied him for a long moment. Do you forgive her? He hesitated. I think forgiveness isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about remembering without bleeding. Nia nodded. And do you forgive yourself? He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that wasn't quite a smile, but close enough. I'm learning. A quiet laugh escaped her, soft and warm. You always did learn the hard way. Lucas turned to her eyes, searching. You stayed, even after everything. She shrugged gently. Someone had to make sure you remembered what light looks like. He took her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. You saved me. No, she whispered. You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible. Below them, the river glimmered, carrying away the last of winter. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then from inside the house, a small voice called out, Eli's, full of excitement and something purer than either of them had known in years. Mom, Dad. Come see. Lucas froze for a heartbeat at the sound of that word, Dad. It wasn't biological, but it was real, and maybe for once that was enough. They walked back inside. The boy stood by the window, a paper airplane in his hand, sunlight streaming across his face. It flies, Eli said proudly. I made it fly this time. Lucas crouched down beside him, smiling. Of course it does. Nia laughed softly, brushing a curl from Eli's forehead. He's got your stubbornness. And your heart, Lucas said quietly. Eli threw the airplane again, and it soared across the room, catching a gust from the open balcony doors before landing gently on the floor. Lucas picked it up, smoothing its folded wings. On the side, in a child's uneven handwriting, were 3 words. For our family. Something inside him broke open, not in pain, but in peace. He looked up at Nia, then back at the boy who had unknowingly rewritten his entire story. You did it, he whispered. Eli grinned. Then we win, right? Lucas smiled. Yes, son, we win. That night after Eli fell asleep, Lucas stood alone by the balcony. The city was quiet, and for the first time in years, so was his heart. He thought about Sheila, about the love that had built him, broken him, and finally freed him. He thought about Elena, whose final act had redeemed a life of shadows. And he thought about Nia, the woman who taught him that healing wasn't forgetting, but choosing to stay open. The wind brushed through the curtains, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the other room, Eli's. It was the sound of a new beginning. Lucas whispered into the night, thank you for letting me start again. The stars above Manhattan shimmered like the reflection of everything he'd lost and everything he'd found. He turned back toward the warm glow of the home behind him. And for the first time, Lucas King didn't feel haunted anymore. He felt alive. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe that even shattered lives can be rebuilt into something beautiful, then don't let it fade away. Share it. Hold it. Remember it. Because somewhere, someone is still waiting for their own light after the storm.